Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. In today's episode, we're going to chart out what it means to have an overcomer's mindset as we continue on our journey toward improved self-worth and confidence. I know how real the struggle is to confront and overcome fear, self-doubt, and insecurity. Yet, it's possible and important for our quality of life to confront and overcome these obstacles. This is why I developed the Restore Your Inner Warrior series, where I share power-packed tools and tips that will help you strengthen your inner warrior and overcome the things holding you back from living your best life. As I mentioned in the previous episodes, you really do hold the power to conquer these struggles, and you're just steps away from learning how and what to do next. If you're ready to boldly step into a life of happiness and confidence, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your healing journey with this next episode. And welcome back to those already walking with me down this restoration path. If this podcast inspires you, consider joining my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community support. Previously, we explored the first two secrets to building and restoring our confidence, value, and purpose as we heal internally and wrestle with life's complexities and grit. This third episode in a 5-part series is dedicated to secret number 3, that there's tremendous power in healing and embracing an overcomer's mindset. Here in this episode, you'll gain a better understanding of what an overcomer's mindset is, hear an awakening story about coming back to life, witness how our overcomer lifestyle enhances our quality of life and impacts others, and learn actionable steps to take to develop and nurture an overcomer's mindset, which includes tip number 1, think bigger. Tip number 2, develop a hope-filled mindset. And tip number 3, refuse to give up on yourself. In the next 2 episodes, we'll get into the remaining 2 secrets that help you restore your inner warrior, which are how to face the giants named fear and doubt, and cut yourself free from the dead weight holding you back from living your best life. So let's dive a little deeper into how to heal those inner wounds and overcome the fears, doubts, and anxieties holding you back. An overcomer's mindset is a powerful force. This is why my third secret to restoring your confidence and happiness is to embrace an overcomer's mindset. Because our perspective is our literal sight. We see every single thing through the lens of our perspective. This is why several individuals can witness the same exact experience or situation and have radically different memories and versions of it. How we see the world becomes how we think about it and then how we react to it. Simply put, sight plus thoughts plus reactions equals character. As a kid, I struggled to learn this lesson. Yet, I did always have the end in sight. So it didn't matter if I wanted to be accepted, if I was the new kid at school, or if I wanted to play with the kids on the playground, or if I wanted to get my parents' permission to go and do something, or whatever it was that I was after. I had that end in mind. So I knew what it was that I wanted the ultimate outcome to be. But I didn't learn the importance of tracing back and then changing the things that would lead to my desired outcomes. So a lot of times, regardless if I had that end in sight, it took me several years to learn that I had to backtrack in order to adjust my actions to then do the things that were necessary, take the necessary steps to get the outcomes that I imagined. Just as our perspective and thoughts are important, so are planning out the reactions and actions we plan to live by. Now, when we put certain skills into practice, we are doing the important work to restore our inner warrior as we rebuild our own broken world. Just like I mentioned in the last episode, our character is shaped by how we face the challenges in our lives, not by the challenges themselves. The challenges just set us into motion, where our action is required to be played out in a specific way in order to, again, get those outcomes that we desire, or again, in order to go through the processes that we need to go through in order to foster our healing. So, some of the bravest people that I admire are those whose character has been shaped by an overcomer's mindset. I opened my self help book, Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, with a quote from Helen Keller. She says, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And I really loved this quote because I thought that it really spoke to, well, the themes that I was talking about in that book and the themes that I'm also talking about here, which is that idea that we can overcome the struggles. The struggles don't define us. Uh, and it's a comeback story. I mean, who doesn't love a good comeback kid story? My own comeback kid story has many layers. Today, I'd like to share some of the times that I realized what kept me coming back again and again to fight through the gritty things that life kept throwing at me. Something you should know about me is that I'm a mama of three daughters. Raising daughters is a difficult church. They're spirited little things who quickly grow up to reach everything on the top shelf. And this world is really dangerous for girls. It can feel like a full-time job too, raising kids. You're challenged with keeping them safe at home, safe out in the outside world, and safe from each other. Yet, we can't keep kids safe from everything. Bad things are going to happen to them no matter what we do, no matter how much of a helicopter parent we try to be, because we live in a world where bad things happen to people who don't deserve it. All I could do for my girls as I raised them was to protect them when I could, prepare them for what I couldn't, and equip them with an overcomer's mindset in this unjust world. I talk about my moment of awakening story in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. This is a time in my young mom years when I was wrestling with some old struggles and some new struggles and growing anxious about not being able to protect myself or my daughters from the dangers of bad experiences. So I'm actually just going to read you an essay from Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. This is my beautiful book. And there are links for it below in the show notes if you're interested in more information on it. So this one is called Overcome an Unjust World. There's a downed oak at the nature center near my home that reveals the mystery of coming back to life. No matter how far you've fallen or how long you've been down. We originally named it Dead Man Falling, yet the name doesn't accurately paint the portrait of its existence. The tragic part of this down tree is that it had been hundreds of years old before it gave up the good fight and buried its own head in the dirt. It's unclear how long the tree lay prostrate. Its roots loosened from their deep resting place while the earth and life attached to it began growing up around it. This new birth, springing forth, would be impressive enough if it weren't for the most extraordinary manifestation. Row upon row of offspring seedlings and saplings that spanned the entire length of the old trunk. What struck me most the first time I saw the oak's rebirth was how the more mature saplings reached and stretched toward the sun. This was a breakthrough moment for me and a break-free moment in my restoration. Here I was, my oldest daughter's hand tucked in mine, my middle daughter strapped in the backpack carrier behind me, and my youngest asleep in my pregnant belly. I looked up toward that same sun where my life source washed me in a warmth that was a comfort place. Look how your life has blossomed, the gentle spirit within whispered. Yeah, sure, I thought. But what if they repeat the cycle? What if my girls have to live through the same things I've gone through? Listen to yourself, the voice replied. Did you not go through these things and thrive despite them? Are you not an overcomer? I rolled my eyes. An overcomer. I had been studying and meditating on what it meant to be an overcomer, so this was a little ironic for me. I recently read that the word overcomer stemmed from the Greek word Nike, which means victory in battle. Some of the stuff I read about overcoming this world's battles focused on releasing things to God and the universe. But let me be real with you. I was really struggling with how justice worked in this world and letting go of unresolved things. Though I didn't necessarily deal with these unresolved things, I couldn't seem to loosen my grip on them either. As I meditated on what it meant to be an overcomer, I was reminded of the power of conquering fear to regain control of a situation. But living with fear was exactly what I was doing. With each daughter I brought into this unjust world, my what if list grew, and my fear grew with it. The gentle voice wasn't done with me. You didn't just move on from the things meant to hurt and destroy you, you conquered them. What you're building will change this narrative. And yet I can't forget. No matter how hard I try, I can't forget. I never told you to forget those things. The Spirit reminded me. I told you I'd use them to mold you, and you'd use them to witness to other survivors. My attention was drawn back to the oak in front of me. Oak, extremely durable and strong. Oak, the forest's stable force with enviable endurance. Even knocked to near death with no hope of standing tall again, in its natural form, it still sustained life. And in sustaining its life, it reimagined what that life would look like. Where the tree once stood strong, 7 saplings, almost as tall as I, rose in its place. 7 is a symbolic powerhouse. 7 is the seeker of truth. 7, the number of completeness. 7, the number of perfection. Girl, I thought, squeezing my 5-year-old's hand, there's never been a better time to come back to life. So I share that story with you because sometimes we have those wake up moments and they don't always just happen, like just out of nowhere. They happen after we've actually been going through these processes within our own meditations. And if you're a spirit person like I am, or a spiritual person like I am, we take it to prayer, we're meditating on it, you're talking about it with other people who are good supporters in your life. But we're going through the necessary things already in the background. That's running in the background. We're doing all those things. We're going through the grief process. We're dealing with the emotions. And then we have, we're ready. So when we're ready, we have these moments sometimes that are just really powerful that bring all those things together and open our eyes in a very new way for the first time and allow us to see it more clearly and to see that we maybe have already had some of the successes that we're just being really hard on ourselves, which I don't know if you are like I am, but I'm really hard on myself. So sometimes our epiphany to overcoming an unjust world or overcoming some of the unjust things that have happened to us will come in these beautiful moments that just bring everything full circle for us. And that was the case for this essay. Did it resolve everything? No. I don't think I'm here today to talk to you about how you can resolve all of your problems. That would be, well, a lifetime of episodes. I'm here to just give you a couple of skills and a couple of my own, tips that I've tried and tested in my own perseverance that led me to these overcomer moments that I didn't allow these things to define me. I didn't allow them to stop me from going after what I wanted most in life. I had my eye on the end game, and I wasn't going to relinquish that power to anyone or anything. And I was going to keep learning and adjusting in real time to doing that backtrack and then moving forward to work toward what it is that I want. And so, do you want to know another amazing thing about living with an overcomer's mindset? Is you never really know who else you're positively impacting. Though sometimes you do get to hear from others about how you impacted them. This reminds me of a time when my youngest daughter was away at college at the Culinary Institute of America. In one of her classes, the professor had gone around the room and asked all of the students which public figure that they most admired. And so they circled around the room, and every single one of the students was naming off, these famous individuals, athletes, historical figures, political figures, influencers, people who were really well known, names that were recognizable in the circle. So when it got to my daughter, she said, "My mom." And of course, all the students in the class started laughing, and the teacher was like, "Okay, okay, right, calm down." And she looked at my daughter and said, "Why your mom?" And my daughter said, "My mom's not only an author, she gave us the best she could with very little resources. She always taught us to see the good in the world and people and to appreciate the little things. She showed us we could get through anything we put our mind to it." She said everyone was awed by this response, and I'm not going to lie, I was pretty awed by it too. Her friend said, "Wow, I wish I had that." And I wish that I was there so I could lean over to that girl and tell her, "Hey, follow me, and I'll show you how." Technically, when my daughter gave this answer, I was a public figure in a really small way, but that wasn't the point for her. The point was that I had apparently made a very big impression on her. When I thought about this beyond the honor I felt, I realized what was at the root of this way of thinking. It really was living with an overcomer's mindset and living so out loud around her whole entire life with that mindset. This was the one who I was pregnant with that day I had that epiphany. And so that's the version of me that she grew up with. And so to hear her say that was pretty amazing to have somebody. I didn't put her up to it. I didn't tell her, "Hey, can you do this thing? Can you say this for me?" She felt very inspired by what the other people were saying, and that's what she chose to say. And so, yes, I feel very honored that she thought of me as somebody who inspired her that way. And that's pretty amazing. But it's a real big testimony to how we are a light for other people and we don't even realize it. Like yeah, of course, I'm raising three daughters, so I want to be a good example to them. I want to be a good example to their friends. I want to give good advice when they ask me things. I have to be careful that I'm not just coming across like I'm gossiping when they're telling me, things that are happening with other, peers in school or in the community. But I wasn't, my motive for living that way with them and modeling that behavior was more because that's just the character that I wanted. That's who I wanted to present to the world. And I had to keep putting that work in because you don't just wake up one day and you have it all together. You have to put that work in. It's a very intentional process and you have to keep doing it. And when you fall off track, you have to get back up and you have to do it again and again. And you just have to keep going through it. So there are many ways we can develop and nurture an overcomer's mindset. My tip number one is to build an optimistic mindset that thinks bigger. What I mean by that is to view things from multiple perspectives to gain a healthier perspective. I do exercises like this with my students. So sometimes when I'm working with my students and I'm trying to talk about perspective and how multiple people can see the same thing, experience the same thing, but they're from different perspectives. They have different biases, they have different backgrounds. So you could take 10 different statements like an investigator or a detective will on the scene of a crime or the scene of an auto accident, and you go back and you try to make sense of it because everybody's saying different things. And so you're looking for what's overlapping, what are the same things, everybody's saying the same thing over and over again. And then you're trying to piece together, maybe someone had a better vantage point, maybe somebody wasn't even looking up, they were looking at their phone, they didn't look up until they heard the cars crash, that type of stuff. So you're looking for those types of details. But I do this exercise because I want to help them understand how our perspective, how much attention we were giving something at the time, or our angle of view might make us misjudge things. It might make us, see what we want to see, or again, see different things or put our bias on it. For instance, let's say that, your bias is, I hear my girls say all the time, they should take driver's licenses away from all these senior citizens. If you're almost 100 years old, you shouldn't be on the road. You drive so darn slow. And so you might have someone like that who's sitting in their car and, saying immediately it's the old man's fault, the accident, because all old people shouldn't have their license, which is a logical fallacy, but I'm just saying you have this bias, you bring it to the table. So now maybe in another car, someone's looking at that same teenager or that same young adult and saying, she already admitted she was kind of looking at Instagram while they were driving, and she looked up at the impact. So here's all these distracted teenagers trying to tell us, what's going on, even though their head's buried on their device. And so now you have these biases that you bring in and you judge it according to your biases, which has absolutely nothing to do with the facts of the reality of the case. And so I love this exercise. It's always really interesting. It always has a very, really lively, it always leads to a very lively conversation in these small group settings. So I love doing these exercises in these small group settings because it really is a super easy way to quickly show everyone present how radically different our perspectives are, and how when I get into some of the things that are going to come up later, some of these other things will make sense, that we bring all of these different qualities in, how we see already. We're talking about retraining our thinking, but we already come to every experience with patterns of thinking. And so we bring those patterns of thinking, not just the judgment the example that I use. There's so many different criteria that comes into play. So many times when something bad happens, we get buried by our initial reactions, fears, and frustrations. And then we aren't able to see what's going on outside ourselves. And that clouds our judgment. It's really hard to respond and act well when our sight is limited or we're trapped into this survival mode. So I love to liken this to like tunnel vision, which is an idiom that most people know. People throw that around all the time. But you think about tunnel vision, there's a couple of really interesting visuals that come into play. So, you've got just the typical, like, the horse blinders where you can't see anything in the periphery here. You can only see what's in front of you, but then you can also see what's out. But if you enter into a tunnel, like when you're driving and you're passing through, like, a tunnel that cuts through a mountain, and the moment you enter that tunnel, you can no longer see anything outside of the tunnel. You can't see, the other sides of the mountain. You can't see the sky anymore. All you can see is what's in front of you, the road and maybe the opening ahead, and your perspective is very limited. And so maybe you're in a situation where you're using binoculars. So if you've ever used binoculars, there's a really interesting thing, because now you have both eyes and you're taking away your peripheral, you're also skewing your eyesight, but you're super focusing on things. And so what happens when we get into survivor mode is we do hyperfocus, because our fear is heightened, our fight or flight or freeze is heightened. And so we have to make really, really critical decisions because we're in danger, or we perceive that we're in danger. And so that tunnel vision then can become where we've got really great eyesight. We can see a mile away like a hawk can see that particular thing that we're looking for, but we miss all the other stuff. So we might not see a danger lurking over here, that's a type of danger. It's a new danger to us because we're looking for specific stuff. And so you miss a lot of stuff. Anybody who has lost something in your house and you're going around and you're looking for just a particular thing, you're going to miss a lot of different things because you're focused. You have told your mind, look for this thing. And so it's almost like look for this and forget about everything you know about anything else that you see in your path. And so that's what that tunnel vision becomes. And so when we have this, we're talking about perspective, what I'm trying to get you to retrain is to not get trapped in that tunnel vision where all you can see is your woundedness. All you can see is, the where you ended up in this bad experience. You have this bad experience, and every experience is different. So I know I'm really overgeneralizing, but you can get the gist of what I mean. You have a situation where you're struggling or something bad has happened, and here you are, and now you have to decide what next? What do I do next? The thing is, once we do this, once we scan the area, then we do need to narrow in and focus on the positive and beneficial aspects of things. This doesn't mean that we should not notice anything negative and that we should only focus on the good. This means that we have to have this selfish motive that we don't want to stay stuck in the aftermath of our struggles. So it really is a form of selfishness. It's, you know, even if what you're going through is not fair, you didn't deserve to be in this position at the moment, you can't give away your power like that. You can't get stuck there. I mean, bad things sometimes happen for no good reason. Yet we are not defined by these things, nor can we change the fact that they happen to us. We can only control what we do moving forward and how we do it. This brings me to my tip number 2, which is to develop a hope-filled mindset. What I mean by this is that after we sift through all the things we learned from viewing it from different perspectives, we envision the future outcome we anticipate. I keep coming back to that, but we have to be able to know what we want, and we have to believe that it's achievable. I keep coming back to that concept over and over and over again. I know I sound like a broken record, but it is so true. You have to be able to believe that you can achieve that outcome because nothing else will line up with it. You can't just go through the motions. You can't fake it till you make it. It doesn't work that way. We must see the future we want and then do the necessary work to get toward that future. Okay, so when we do this, we train our mind to focus on what our desired destination is and then start thinking about what we need to do to get there. This is not entirely the same thing as having a positive mindset, though this way of thinking that I'm talking to you about does often lead to a positive mindset because what you're really thinking does shape you. And the reality we ultimately need is one where we get through the tough stuff and manage to thrive despite these things. It's healthy to see the positive in situations and people, but the caution here is to resist only seeing the positive without regard to anything else. This leads to toxic positivity, which invalidates and dismisses our negative feelings and thus impacts our reaction. So I'm not asking you to suck it up, get over it. I'm not asking you to tell yourself, oh, this could be so much worse. Although sometimes you have to remind yourself, okay, this 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 could be worse. But that's not what I'm saying because we get bombarded with that message. This leads to toxic positivity, which invalidates and dismisses our negative feelings and thus impacts our reaction. So this toxic positivity is really trending right now. People are talking about it, but they're talking about it from really interesting ways. They're not calling it toxic positivity. They're calling it having a positive mindset. And they're trying to interchange these words as if the concepts are the same. And that's why I'm trying to distinguish that you can have a positive mindset, but if you're only focusing on the positive stuff, which a lot of these messages are, it leads to this toxic positivity, which is really unhealthy because it, first of all, if you're not able to identify and really come to grips with what your emotions are, what those negative things are, you're not going to be able to grieve them properly. And if you can't grieve them, you certainly can't bury them. They don't just disappear and go away. Time alone does not heal these emotions, these negative emotions. You have to go through the grieving processes. You have to go through the steps in order to invest in that healing. And so that's just like physical injuries require treatments and specific types of medicines and therapies and aids and care. The same happens with your emotional healing, except for you're the one in there doing most of that stuff. You're the one, there's no like, peroxide you can pour on it and put a band-aid on it and give it air and stretch it. You have to do different things. So, I'm speaking figuratively, but it's a different beast, but it's the same concepts can apply, is that you have to foster the healing. You have to use these different strategies and go through these different processes in order to bring your full healing around. In doing this, we are allowing ourselves to grieve and heal as we deal with any of those emotional trauma, fear, doubt, anxieties, insecurities that we have. And it's also important, like I mentioned in the last episode, to wrestle with those gritty things. That's part of that, going through the grieving and the healing process as well. Otherwise, we risk being the one who dismisses, ignores, or buries our negative feelings. Since I talk about these things in the previous two episodes, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link for them below in case you want to go back and check them out. All right, so my third tip is to refuse to give up on yourself. So one thing I've learned about myself, and maybe you're starting to recognize that in me, I do not give up easily. I keep getting up and trying again when I'm knocked down. I learn from my experiences, I make adjustments, and I go at it again. The bottom line is I do not give up on myself, period. I mentioned this in the first episode where I explain how I approach certain life experiences like they're science experiments. I keep returning to them again and again and kind of dissecting and assessing what worked, what didn't work. And then I gain insights from those experiences that I can apply to the next one. And then, of course, applying that concept, you get up and you try again. You get up and you keep going. Then you're always going to, I'm not saying every bad thing or every struggle you have, you're going to keep repeating. Okay, that's a whole other podcast. We talk about the chronic cycles that we get stuck in. But it's like bad things are going to happen again. You're going to struggle again. So, for instance, I was near death a couple of months ago, just dealing with some illnesses, a bunch of different things going on at once. They were all very treatable things, but the medical industry kept misdiagnosing it. So, hospital after hospital was exacerbating my condition. And I got to a point where I had to be hospitalized, and I was in the hospital for 5 days until they could get everything stabilized and under control. And I started to feel better on day 5, but I came home. I wasn't 100%, but I was like, okay, there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And I kept saying to myself, we do that thing. This is why I'm sharing this with you. I never want to experience that again. So you say, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to never experience that again, but we don't have control over that. And when it comes to our health, we can be really, diligent about taking exceptional care of ourselves, but we can't control never getting sick. We can't control those things, something, being triggered in our health. And the last few days, I don't know if there's something in the air that's triggering my allergies, and I have this condition, it's triggering this LPR condition that I have, and those triggers are starting to resurface, and I'm like, oh dear God, I don't want to go through this again. And it's been really kind of traumatic for me to, not take my mind off of that, but I also have other things to do. I'm grossly behind in everything because I lost about 2 months to struggling with this illness, over a month of it mostly bedridden. And now I'm starting to feel those things. And yesterday night, I started to feel like very similar symptoms returning. And it was kind of, those trauma triggers. It was overwhelming. And I had to get a hold of myself again. And I had to say, okay, because again, I've already been there. So I've learned so much from that experience. And now I can take that and I can apply it here. So it didn't take me long to readjust my perspective and to say, I hope that obviously my condition doesn't get worse right now, but I know a lot of things not to do to help myself. And I know a lot of things that I can do to help myself. And today, thankfully, because I had to record this podcast, I'm feeling, better. I'm not 100% better, but I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more myself and I'm feeling more hopeful. But I really feel like a big part of that was getting control of my thinking. Was like, I see the end game in mind. And in my case is I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to panic. and that's not going to accomplish anything. And I have these things that I want to do. I love doing this podcast. I love meeting with you twice a week. And so I'm like, I need to pull myself together and focus on the things that matter. And the end game in mind is I'm going to do these other things parallel. I'm living life, and I'm also going to be taking care of my health and doing the things that I need because the ultimate outcome is I need to be healthy. And so, so that's my kind of my real time. It might not be the best example, but it's a good example of how we can just be hit with something in an identical situation where, sometimes it's not going to be the same struggle, but in this case, it was an identical struggle that that fear started to rise up, and that dread started to rise up. I do not want to go back. I mean, nobody wants to go back into suffering. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow water. It was miserable. I wouldn't wish it on the person I hate the most in this world. It was miserable. And so, so I got through it and I practiced all of these things. So it was also very interesting because I was preparing for this particular episode and all of this stuff was fresh in my mind. So when that hit, and the temptation was to, let the anxiety start to, get me thinking in the wrong way, focusing on those negative things. I needed to notice the negative things, but not really focus on the negative things and let them get me stuck there in that wounded state or in a state of, frozen fear, not moving forward when I have plenty of skills now. It's not the first time that these things have happened. It's not the second time they've happened. It's just the first time I was hospitalized a month and a half ago. So we take those experiences and we treat them like science experiments and we learn from them. And of course, just like science keeps evolving, we'll keep growing. The world around us will keep growing and changing. And that experiment or the scientific findings will also change. So the facts as we know it will continue to evolve also. So don't think you're ever going to just get the formula and that's it, one and done. Okay, it's always going to be this way because that's not how life works either. So what does it look like to not give up on yourself? You have to know your boundaries. So you have to know what your boundaries are, and then you have to clearly communicate what those boundaries are. And you have to be very, very careful of the people who try to come and pick up your boundary line and say, I think I want to move it over here. I think it would be better if we just cut it. We just get rid of it. And you have to know your boundaries so that you can honor them and so that you can communicate them and that you can expect other people to honor them. You also need to learn from those setbacks, bad experiences, and struggles, kind of like I just explained to you in my example there. Don't stay stuck in that wounded state. Grieve what you need to grieve. Make peace what you need to make peace with after that. You can't stay in that state of unforgiveness. Like I've mentioned in previous episodes, that's like drinking the poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It doesn't work that way. You're just setting yourself back. You're just making yourself sick in this state of unforgiveness, and it fosters all kind of negative stuff. So then you're always seeing the negative in this person or in this situation. Maybe there's multiple people. Maybe it's an environment that you're responding to and not people at all. And you're seeing the negative, then you're focusing on the negative, then you're expecting only negative things will happen. And you can see how that starts to manifest things that you don't want to manifest in your life. And you also start to get resentful. Resentment is a really ugly emotion because it often leads you to do things that are either out of character or not in line with the character that you want. So if you're saying, I don't want to be a spiteful person, I don't want to be a vengeful person, I don't want to be the mean girl, I don't want to be the one that people say, well, hurting people hurt people, all of those things that are a part of, this concept of, getting stuck in that place of our woundedness. We want to go through all of these processes and then ultimately make peace and forgive what we need to forgive, not forget, but forgive so that we can be free. So we can just cut ourselves free from that dead weight. You also need to protect your safety and peace of mind. So cut off anything or anyone who is harming your well-being, growth, and safety. There's no way around that. I know when I speak to this generation, the cancel culture generation, and the one wrong move and you're blocked and you're removed from all social media, that's kind of not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is when you notice, it could just be a one and done. You might be out there, I don't know, swiping left, swiping right, and then you see a quality in somebody and you're like, nope, not happening. Block, lose my number, we're done. I'm talking about, those some of those situations, but I'm also talking about cutting off people who are chronically abusive or chronically stealing your peace or chronically sucking you into their drama or chronically just using you as like a garbage dump to I was just talking to a loved one recently about, that, and it's a trauma for her. The constantly people coming and just dumping this like horrific trauma in their lives on her. And then she's like, I can't be around that person who's doing this to you. I can't believe you keep going back to it. You have options to get away and to not allow that type of behavior to happen in your life. And then she sees them continue to go back into it, and then they just come and they're telling her horrible things. And it's, you know, those are the people, you know, those are the people who you have to protect your peace, and you have to protect your time is also precious. So protect your time, protect your resources, protect your energy. You have to protect your mind also. I tell my husband this all the time. Garbage in is garbage out. So if you're constantly around these people who are a negative drain or who are not a good influence, again, on the type of character that you say you want to be and say you want to have, you have to also build your world and surround it with people and things that align with that. If you don't, then you're it's counterintuitive, it's counterproductive. You can't say you want to be a specific way or you're not going to tolerate specific behaviors or situations, and then you're only surrounding yourself with those individuals, and then they start to influence you. They start having the next thing you know, you're always negative and always irritated and how's it going? Oh man, it's contagious. So you don't want to allow yourself to catch any of those types of cooties, okay? For lack of a better word. For the love of God, stop people pleasing. Stop saying yes to things that hurt you or saying yes to things that you just don't have time for, energy for, interest for. You don't have the right motives for saying yes. Stop people pleasing. Also, know your worth and don't let anyone diminish or abuse it. So often in my own journey, I have been in relationships with people who have tried to do that. They have tried to diminish my value. They have tried to make me very codependent on them or, rely on them. And I get it. A lot of people love to be needed. That's part of their love language. But you need to know your worth and be so confident in that worth that when you sense somebody trying to creep into your life and try to break that down and cut it up and set it on fire, you need to protect yourself from that. So that comes back to, cutting off people and getting yourself out of situations that are stripping you of your worth. A lot of you, maybe this can relate to you, that maybe you have a job or someone at your job who does this exact thing to you. I know I have my fair share of job experiences where my value was completely diminished and completely undervalued. And you stay there, and the longer you stay there, the more you get resentful. And, once that resentment starts to compound, then it actually does start to make you feel like, well, maybe that's all I'm worth. Maybe, and you start to do the maybe dance. Well, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe if I did this better, if I did that, and that's a horrible place to be. So know your worth and keep nurturing it and protecting it. And then forgive yourself. For the love of God, forgive yourself. I know I'm preaching to myself right now, but when you get off track or things don't go as planned or as anticipated, just get back on track and then be gracious with yourself. And be gracious with the other people around you too. I mean, remember, you're a human being, but so are the people that you are living with in life or coming in contact with in life. They're human beings also. So this overcomer mindset might be an opportunity to also see the good in people. So even if somebody does something bad to you, or you have, an altercation where you don't see eye to eye and it's heated, and or maybe you go through something where you're both struggling, and then you're trying to mend this relationship, or you're trying to mend whatever the situation is that happened between the two of you, or bring closure to it. And you have to remember that other person is a person too. I mean, and sometimes, don't get me wrong, some people are just jerks. You don't need to try to empathize with them at all. They're just jerks. They're just mean. They did something out of spite. They did something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what is happening in their life outside of it when they can chronically just keep abusing you and they're just mean. Okay, I'm not trying to say that at all. But even that, we can still recognize that that person's motives or that person's patterns are conditioned, according to certain things going on in their life, but it doesn't excuse it necessarily. But understanding it also helps us realize that it's not always about us, or that we aren't literally the problem. Sometimes we're the surrogate. We're the stand-in for it. We're just the person they came across. It's not personal to them. They're just looking for someone to lash out on, and here you are. and there you get it. And so, forgive yourself and forgive others, obviously. But the important thing is, forgiving yourself ties into my last point, which is you need to learn to love yourself, and you need to invest in that self-love daily. And there are lots of little things that you can do to invest in your self-love walk. I actually do go into that in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. I have a 30-day restoration journey, and each one of the days is what I call different, like, love yourself things. So it's different ways to invest in yourself. And there's all different things, what, from journaling to actually going out and doing things, even gaining support from outside sources and individuals. There's all types of things that are in there, but these are all part of your love walk with yourself. And it's super important that you invest in that regularly, not just daily. Like, it's not like a one and done thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes self-loving myself in the morning and then go. It's regular. It's all day. You're constantly investing in yourself and doing all of these things that all translate into your self-love walk, because ultimately you're doing all of these things for your future. And it's from a place of care. You care about yourself. You care about your future. And you have to care about yourself, and you have to care about your future, because if you aren't in good health, physical health or mental health, it's going to hinder your ability to fully function for yourself and for everybody around you. So it doesn't mean, like, if you're not healthy, like I just admitted to you a few minutes ago, I'm not 100% healthy right now, and that's okay. I'm not going to stay stuck here, but that's where I'm at right now. That doesn't mean that I'm useless or I'm only half useful because of my health situation. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is your end game is to be fully functioning, or as optimally functioning as you can, because you can't always get entirely over everything. I get it. Trust me, there are things I don't know. I can always hope that I'm going to get over them entirely, but there are things that have happened to me, struggles and traumas from my past, that I have not yet gotten over. I've gotten, like, say, 90% over it. And then there's that trigger that brings it again. And I'm like, dear God, why do I keep coming back to this? Having to go back, retrace, what did I miss? And over and over and over. And I realize, you know what? It is what it is. I have to keep going back, and I have to keep dealing with that. I have to have the end game in mind, which is I'm not going to stay in that wounded place, even when it's just a trauma trigger and it's not the actual incident, because trauma triggers will keep pulling us back to that wounded spot again and again. And sometimes it's just an invitation to come and sit with it for a spell. It's an invitation to say, I have something else to show you here. And so if we have, again, that overcomer's mindset, and we are invited back into that place, instead of saying, oh, it's forcing me back into that place, change your mindset. I've been invited back into this place to now see what did I miss, or is there a new lesson? Again, we've changed, the world around us has changed, the people around us has changed. Is there something new that we need to see from this and then deal with? Or is it just an old thing over and over and over again? And a lot of times it is. And that could be, maybe you're in a chronically abusive situation with, a loved one, and that might not be the actual wound, but every time you have an interaction with that person, it triggers that wound, that memory, and then it sends you back to that spot. And you're like, why am I back here? I'm so over this. I don't get it. And then you have to sit with it, and you have to go through that thinking process, and you have to wrestle with the grit. Like you're on an archaeological dig. You have to go through and sift the sand and try to find the artifacts. You have to try to find the things like, okay, what is it here that I'm supposed to find? What is it here I'm supposed to notice? And then what am I supposed to do with it, and how am I supposed to proceed moving forward to, again, my end destination? Like the proverb I live by, we and the powers above can use everything meant to destroy us to build a better version of ourselves. So help your inner warrior fiercely flourish in battles that often begin and end in the mind. If this podcast inspired you, join my free Facebook community of young women just like you, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.